I made 10 games with Rosebud AI to see how it holds up as a game engine and to see if I can try and make my dream racing game. It seems like the AI bubble is popping right now, and people are realizing that the novelty isn't actually valuable, and AI isn't really suited for super complex tasks that integrate with real life. Instead, it's best suited for things that are outcome-based, that you could actually track with a metric the outcome. And so this video is a strange one. Today we're looking at Rosebud AI. They actually asked me to make this video, and usually I make Game Boy games using GB Studio, which lets me make games for the original Game Boy without needing to code. It uses visual scripting. But in Rosebud's first email to me, they said something similar, that this is a platform, a game engine of sorts, for people who do not know how to code. So I had a few goals and a few rules that I personally would abide by when doing this video. So I'll go over them briefly before I go into the story of how this all happened. The first one was I wouldn't be paid to talk positively. And although they said they'd pay me $100, my thinking was that if they didn't like my honesty, I would just publish it without their money. So that was how I went into it. And I didn't need to act on this because midway through, I came back to them with all my negative thoughts, and we had a little meeting, we went through it, and they offered me more money to continue and go ahead with this video. So I commend them for that. My second rule was that I wouldn't make a 2D game. I make 2D games every day, right? I make Game Boy games with pixel art, so I'm not interested in replacing that part of my life, right? I want to explore 3D. And if you know me, I was a 3D modeler. I studied game development at university, and I did the art route of the course, and I was very interested in 3D modeling cars. And I haven't ever really got away from that. So my plan with this was to pull me back into wanting to do 3D games, 3D art, 3D cars, right? So that was my goal, to avoid 2D and not mess up my Game Boy related stuff. And my third thing was that I wanted to make a car game. I set out in one of the first replies that I wanted to make a car game and I wanted to use physics. And they assured me that it was set out to do that, so I went forward with it. So I think it's best we start from the beginning and we kind of walk through the path I took with my time with Rosebud AI. And that begins with playing games. The platform is entirely within the browser, so you can make games and play them from within the browser. I think that's a big positive with Rosebud AI. If you know me, I publish all of my Game Boy games on itch.io as browser games, and I'm so glad GB Studio does that. And I think that Rosebud AI doing a similar thing is fantastic. However, there are other things I do not like about this that we'll talk down the line. So I played some games that I thought would kind of introduce me to car games and such in Rosebud AI. I played a few other ones as well that were probably better than all the car ones, but that wasn't my goal, right? My goal was to make a car game. And the reason I think that having a goal like this is important, like wanting to make a car game, is because when we use an engine or we use a service, if we don't have a goal, our time with the platform will be tainted by what they want us to do, right? So if, for example, like every single person on the platform is making a 2D platformer, right? Then they'll want you to make a 2D platform because they know it works, right? But that's not, in my opinion, how I think you should approach something new, right? You kind of need to put yourself into it, especially if it's AI, right? You should be challenging it. You shouldn't just be, going along with it. If you just go along with it, you're not learning as much. So all of these car games, I wasn't really impressed by. There are nuggets of amazingness in there that clearly the developers had gone out of their way to do above and beyond, right? But ultimately, I have a vision of a car game, and I wanted to make that. And I hope that if you were to use Rosebud AI, you would go in with a vision too. You have an idea for a game already. I would say, write it down and make a game design document. Not too big because you will change it as you prototype and you play the game. But let's start making a game with Rosebud AI and see how it goes. Obviously, I've already done this, and I did it for about a month. And near the end, like I said in the beginning, I went to them with my list of grievances. And then afterwards, I made one final game to kind of test out everything that I had learnt from the previous attempts and also try the 3D model asset generator that wasn't available for when I was doing it at the beginning of the experiment. So I'll walk you through each game I made and my thoughts on it. Right, so here are the 10 games I made in my time with Rosebud AI. Start at the bottom right down here, that was my first game, and the top left is Dino Talk, which is the last game I made. I did not name these games, I did not set the cover art, okay? You can play these yourself, I believe, as they're all on my profile and they're all public. Let's play one of these games. Start with the first one. As I already said, I was planning on making a car game. So this one, you can see why I gave up on this one. It's actually driving backwards and it's leaning in the opposite direction. The wheels are turning the opposite way that I'm inputting. There is no ground in which we are driving up. It seems like the ground is voxel based, the way the sides are like angled like that and the way we're hopping up. And I saw a tip that said, if you're stuck, how about you start again? Later on, I believe that's probably a true thing. Like, it is, you get to a point in a certain game, you realize that the design itself is flawed. It's not necessarily the AI's fault. You have to kind of go through trial and error with the AI to like figure out what it can and can't do. It's not amazing, you know? Let's have a look at the other ones. Climb to Sarah. This one has a gear system, I believe. So you have to, like, you know, change gear with Q and E. It's even a clutch. You can brake, but the braking isn't that interesting. This one I feel like set me in good motion, right? You can see how the car isn't actually, you know, on the ground properly. And like there's, okay, now we're going through the ground. And there are certain phrases that the AI liked and disliked or didn't care about. And I feel like this one was one that I learnt from. It was like 6 degrees of freedom or something. Yeah, so this one's clearly broken. But there's some cool things about it. Like we can go off-roading, right? Which is what we love in car games. But there are clearly some like laws and physics they're using here that like break it, that I didn't ask for it. And I tried to fix on the next ones. So this one's called Forest Stall Rally, and I think it's because I wanted to be set in a forest and I wanted the car to be able to stall. Oh god, the sound is so annoying. I feel like it being muted actually loses something. You kind of see how bad it is when it's not muted. Like, the logic of the audio is horrible. Oh, yeah, I can't deal with it. And then this one, I kind of learnt that if you want to give it, like, physics, you kind of have to give it something to work with. So my plan was to tell it to use Ford Escort, I think it is. And this was before the 3D modeling thing worked, so I got this blocky thing. And it's very, very slippery. I think I can change the grip of the surface in this menu here. But even when you do this, I don't think it's good enough. And what ends up happening is that it wheel spins, and then when it finally catches, it stalls. Yeah, it's just, the physics are just all wrong. And I kind of wanted to start again. This idea was that I wanted to customize the car, right? I wanted the player to customize the car. So I said, how about you make different presets of different cars, and then we can also edit them. And you can see how it's like jumping around. The wheels are in the ground. Now it's climbing. Obviously, it thinks that the ramp is there when it's not. So if I go back to garage and then change some of these stats, you see they update in real time, which is cool. And you can even name the preset. So I call it Rob. Okay, that says rib. But you can see there's pieces of something good in here, but it's just fundamentally broken. And like the way the AI like generated this dust to have like a tire in it, so naff and cheap and awful. Yeah, just going over all the things it chose to do without asking it was like is half of the frustrations with this. Like, it's not completely wasted time. I did learn from this one, definitely. But let's have a look at the next one, which is Coin Canyon Drive. I didn't record anything for this one. I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to have fun with this one. I'm not going to record it. I'm just going to play around, have some fun. And if you know me, I love MotorStorm on PS3. That was one of the first games I ever got on PS3. That and Little Big Planet. And I tried to make a game that was like MotorStorm, where it had multiple routes that the car could take in each lap, and different cars would be suited for different, different routes. But it ended up as an awful thing where I don't even know what these objects are on the screen right now. It's absolutely crap. The way you fall through the ground. And if you saw in the beginning, actually, when we start it up, it asks us if we want to build the level, build the track. And I tried to do this based on the fact that I wanted to do level design, right? I didn't want it to do level design. But this was how I kind of went about it. Okay, well that's annoying. The display is actually different than what it puts down. Oh, okay, let's try this. It technically works. Yippee! But this is not interesting or good, right? Maybe there's something there, but I would have to start again because just the whole thing's messed up. The wheels are rotating incorrectly. It's actually strange how bad it is, especially since I would have learned from the last mistakes and fixed the wheels. But it every time generates the car with the wheels in the wrong direction every single time on every car game I did. And this one, obviously, I just didn't get around to it. Next one is called Ramp Risk Buggy. I was like, okay, forget the track. The track is annoying. It always generates it too short and too small. So let's do an open world, procedurally generated kind of thing. So this one, we got like a Volkswagen buggy. And it uses like a MotorStorm style thing where if you hold shift, you boost. And if you boost too much, you explode. Which is a fun thing that has a bit of feedback. Ends up, it's a bit, bit crappy. And then you can pick up enough coins, you can customize it and get different colors for your car. I think the one I recommend less is the next one, which is called Route Evasion Sim. I don't remember what I typed in for this. Let's have a look down here. Realistic open world driving jobs game where the player completes route-based objectives while evading hazards and traffic. Using BeamNG-like soft-body rigid physics for believable vehicle behavior and damage, which is not at all what I'm seeing right now. But yeah, this one's bad. This one's the worst one. And then Slip Time. This one is, just a track-based racing game, and it's one of the better ones, except for the awful tire screeching. This one was it started the worst, I think, and then I've managed to fix it up. I think if you go on the grass, your time is cancelled. Yeah, off track. And then you don't get a time. Let's have a look. No, you do. Okay. I think I already cheated in this, and I just went around in circles. Things that, the reason why I don't really like Rosebud AI is because it feels like I'm the playtester. Like, as a designer, you have already thought about all these things, right? We know we shouldn't be able to, go off track and then come around to the same checkpoint and like cash in the time that we just did. Like, we know that shouldn't be true. But you can't, you have to physically play it and tell the AI what it is. And you have to like figure out how to say that to the AI. It's really annoying. But yeah, at least the driving physics are okay. Then we got this one. I think this one is the probably the best and most fun one, purely because I took away the actual driving and I made it so you just hold go and you shift. You do have to steer, or you can steer. And then when you go over the finish line, you got a little parachute. Fun. And then you get best times. And I even made it so the timer is random. Like, you can't predict it. So I think that's pretty cool. Originally, it was predictable, and I was like, this is bad, but obviously my design, I actually managed to implement most of what I wanted into a drag racing game in this one. It would be cool to get a better model. Yeah, this one's probably the most redeeming one. I actually like thought about the world a bit, but again, I would have loved to be able to like actually go in and place these myself, but there's no editor to do that. You have to ask it to do it. And then finally, after everything I'd learned from all the other 9 games and the call with them where I talked about my grievances and they offered some solutions and listened, whatever, I came back with this. It's an engine simulation game. And it's got that temp meter from, that we were talking about in the other one. But the idea is to get the highest speed on this dyno machine. And you can change the stats of the engine. So get more cylinders. There we go. And the idea is you can increase the size of certain things to increase the cooling. And obviously increasing the size of other things makes the cooling worse. Like making the engine bigger makes the cooling worse. But this one for me is the most fun. Like what I would want from this game is to then be able to take this onto a drag strip, right? And then basically integrate into the game we just made last time. And then once we've like figured out that properly, we'll then integrate it into an open world style game, right? That would be the idea of making a system like this is to make a car that's customizable, upgradable, and that has physics. That would be my plan. That was my plan from the very beginning. And I think if you wanted to, you could, there's a button down here, remix. You can go and do that for yourself. It's pretty cool. I gave up though, because it started hallucinating and I was trying to make it do things that it'd done before. But for example, this like clipping into the fan text, every other thing it says won't fit. And then it like stops it moving. And I said to do that. And instead it says radiator core is clipping the cooling fan, which is basically quoting me saying that's like what the problem was, right? And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll make it so it does what all the other things do. And then it doesn't stop it. It just says it needs to stop. And yeah, just it started becoming repetitive, which this one was, it probably took one of the longest times to become repetitive. But yeah, once it like starts repeating itself and hallucinating and gaslighting you, I tended to give up. Yeah, that was my time with Rosebud AI. I'll put up on screen right now a visual of all the games. I've recorded footage of each one, and I'll put on how long the footage was for each of those games to have you have an idea of how long it takes to get to the point I got them to. Because obviously the first generation is like, I don't know, 10 minutes, but it's never done, right? It's never done. You saw it in the gameplay. I didn't even fix some of the problems it started with because there's so many other problems to fix first. So in the end, here are my thoughts on Rosebud AI and if you should use Rosebud AI or any AI assisted tool, I guess, with game development. Rosebud AI is special because although it's technically a game engine, it runs completely in the browser, which I'd say is a cool thing. However, what's bad is that it doesn't have a scene editor, like a level editor, right? You can't make levels, you can't edit things, you can't visually change and manipulate things. So it doesn't ever feel like it's your game. Like the way you press play and you play everyone else's games, when you type in your prompt and then it generates it, it feels like, again, you're playing someone else's game. And then the whole experience of coding or game development is playtesting and then telling it what you don't like, and then it coming back with fixes, right? So it never really truly feels like it's yours. And I think that's what we're missing in Rosebud AI. I think if there was a scene editor and you could place things, it would make it feel more like yours, right? And it means that there isn't that sense of accomplishment like there is when I make GB Studio games. Or for example, I just learned FreeCAD, which is like a CAD modeling software, computer-aided design. And I learned it basically from scratch. Obviously, I was taught Maya and I learned Blender in the past. But this is completely different because it uses like exact measurements and things. And it took me a couple days, but I learned it. and it felt so rewarding, and I want to keep doing it, right? With Rosebud AI, that first initial like generation when it makes something good, or like when you fix something, or when it fixes something that you've told it to fix, and you can actually play the game, that's a cool feeling. But it's never the game you wanted, right? Unless your vision is so cloudy and like you went in with no idea, or like I don't know, you like playing Roblox or something, you go in and you just play a game that looks cool. I don't think that Rosebud AI kind of scratches that game development itch. It feels like a game. The fact that we just tell it to do something, it gives it us, we play test it, we then tell it something else, right? It doesn't feel solid. It really doesn't feel solid, and I'll talk about that later when I talk about the hallucinations. Now, when we talk about no coding experience, right, GB Studio comes to mind, right? It's a drag and drop visual scripting game engine, which means that the developer has to have the game logic in their head and kind of translate it to the Game Boy or to GB Studio, whatever. But I would still call that coding, right? The logic is there, and it's a foundation that that basically is a stepping stone into real coding, right? And I found this with GB Studio as well, that like there are certain things you can't do with visual scripting that we need code for, or that was true in older versions of GB Studio, and it meant that you kind of like get your feet wet with coding. So GB Studio has a kind of a trajectory towards real coding, and I think Rosebud AI wants to do that too, because it has when you're like a higher plan, right? When you're paying more money, it allows you to access the code and edit the code. But the problem is the leap from vibe coding to the actual coding is too great, right? It's too large. There's not an editor window that like breaches that gap. So what I mean by that is like in Unity, when you're coding, you can export or like show the values that you're using in code in the window that you press play in, right? Or like that you see the world in. You can see the values alongside it, and then you can affect those values without going into the code. And it means that you don't have to have any code experience. For example, the programmer can make that system and then make it so the designer can edit it. And I feel like that's what this Rosebud AI is missing. It's treating us like a playtester who is telling the coder what to do, and the coder is sat behind a wall that we can't access. And if we do go behind it, because we aren't a coder, right? We are not coders. Then it's a mumbo jumbo, right? It's a bigger leap. But in other game engines, you would have that step in between where you would make those variables visual to you that you can affect the gameplay without having to go into the code and mess up anything, right? And there were times when, for example, the game I made at the end there, it has like sliders and numbers. That's me trying to make it more like a game engine, right? But it means that the games I make come out more like game engine experiences than games, because to design them properly, to actually be a designer, you have to almost implement designing into the game, which isn't very gamey, right? It kind of breaks the game. There could be scenarios, I guess, where I take my favorite values, I write them down, and then I tell AI to get rid of the UI, and then I put those values back in, right? That could work, but it kind of feels like it goes against the nature of the platform of Rosebud AI. And now I'm going to talk about the massive experience issue that I had repeatedly. It got better near the end, but I still felt it at the very end, and that's why I gave up on that last game. And that is the hallucinations of AI and the fact it can't hold in its memory all of the information of the game and of everything I've told it. And at the beginning, for example, I didn't realize this was an issue. There's actually like a clean context button, right, where you kind of wipe all of the stuff you've put into it, you've told it, and it is only basically relying on what you then put into it, plus all of the code and all of its comments in its code, right? So there is meant to be a solution for this, but what it means is it forgets some of the important things that it already knows. And every game I made, I I basically gave up on it because it got to a point where it wasn't executing the tasks I was asking it to repeatedly. You know, I would rephrase it or write it as specifically as I can, make sure I'm sending screenshots, but it still gaslights me and says, "You're so right. I'll fix that now." And then it spends 10 minutes, or not even 10 minutes, 2 minutes, and then spits it out and says, "All done, boss. It's all good to go." And then you press play and it's still broken. Every single game had that problem. And I think that's just an inherency with AI. I don't think that you can get over that. And the larger your game is, or the more complicated or nuanced or personal, I guess, all of these are like synonyms for saying AI can't deal with games that are complicated, right? I imagine if you kept it so simple, if it was like Candy Crush, or if it was Tetris, right? Where it's like a grid and it's simple and like almost procedurally generated, right? Maybe it could handle it if it was very small. I think this is why they would want me to make a 2D game with the platform, because I think 3D just adds so much things that it has to think about that it can't handle it. So I think I'd say if you're gonna use Rosebud AI, don't use it for making 3D car games. And as one last point, I want to point out that Rosebud AI, it uses like large language models that already exist. It uses Claude, it uses GPT, I think it uses another one. And it means that it's not the one controlling the data, right? I don't actually know where Claude and where GPT are getting their information on coding games from. It could have stolen from me, for all I know, right? And I think it's a shame because we're reliant on these large language models. And I think if we look at the news right now, like a lot of these companies have been sued for using data incorrectly or stealing it without permission. And so if Rosebud AI relies on these language models and these language models are evil in some way, then technically, is Rosebud AI evil? Well, it's definitely not the best. And it wasn't best in terms of experience. It wasn't in terms of best of the games it makes. It wasn't even best in teaching no-code users to make games, because at no point did I actually make a game, right? It made a game, and I told it what kind of game I would have liked, and I kept trying to make it, you know, get closer and closer to what I wanted, but it never did, right? But at least Rosebud AI lets you use the large language model that you would prefer, so you can disconnect from the one that you don't like. And if you guys made it this far in the video, I hope you are interested on this topic, and maybe I should talk about this more in the future. Let me know. Let me know what you thought of this video. Have you ever thought about using AI in your game development? This has kind of taught me that I need to spend the money to buy a template project for a game like car game, and just spend more time in 3D modeling because it's so fun. And I don't think we should be trying to save time on game development as solos and indies, because now with AI, that's actually the selling point, right? You can be like, I made this with my whole heart, right? If you said if I didn't use AI, that's actually impressive now, right? Which obviously 5-10 years ago, who cares? That's actually the baseline, that's normal. But now it actually means something. This whole experiment has definitely reignited my love for making 3D games. So let me know if you'd like to see me try and make a retro style racing game in a 3D engine like Godot. And I'll put my patrons up on screen right now. Thank you so much to you guys. You guys are the absolute best. Remember to like the video if you like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. So I think we're in a new era, guys. We're a new era of personal arts and crafts development, game development, indie development, solo development is the new epic. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.